We're coming to you live from the Assurex PNC conference in San Diego with a very special podcast with our good friend Dave Sanderson, who's the most interesting guy you're ever going to hear. And so with that, it's time.
All right.
Yeah.
Take us back. We've got to talk to you in the past before, and we're going to stay away from most of the super awesome talk from your landing on the Miracle of Hudson, and take us back to Tony Robbins. When you first were approached or interacted with Tony Robbins to join his team, can you set the stage for that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. Now, I don't get to talk about that much. I came in with a volunteer. I was one of those people, have you ever been to a Tony Robbins event putting the brochures down at midnight? I was one of those people. And what happened was his former wife was in the corner talking to two men, and she looked a little uncomfortable. And I just went up and said, Mrs. Robbins, Mr. Robbins needs you in the back. That's all I said. I walked back with her, and she said, you handled that pretty well. And I said, well, thank you very much. She goes, would you like to be on the security team? It's a lot better than putting brochures down. So she put me in the back in the green room. So for a few events, I was in the green room, and then Tony sort of noticed me. And then he sort of elevated me through his team, and to the point where I became the head of security for Tony and had the opportunity to travel with him for 10 years and have his back. And he became a great mentor to me, and basically gave me a lot of insights. Not only helped me during the Miracle on the Hudson, but really around life. So I was very blessed that I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And like my mom told me, which I'll talk about tomorrow, is to do the right thing at the right moment.
So how do you get noticed by Tony Robbins?
You have his back.
You take care of his wife.
Yeah, it's all about the wife first. You got to remember, it's all about the wife first. But no, he's big on loyalty.
But did you skip over something like, do you just fill out an online survey and become Tony Robbins
I just went on an online survey, online application to be a volunteer.
Really? That's it?
That was it. That's
So
all I did.
what brought you there? Like, what was it?
I was doing his events. I paid a lot of money to go to his events, and I didn't want to pay any more money. All right, but I wanted the energy, right? I had two kids, and it was like we had college educations and things. So it was all really about I want to be around the energy, but I really didn't want to pay a lot of that more money to go see it again. So that's how it started. So was there any aspiration there that you were manifesting, or did that all just happen organically? It happened organically, and I was blessed because being around that, seeing the energy, and being around that energy, and seeing how a master does things. But one of the things he also allowed me to do when I was assistant and then head of security is be around the people that he was around. Because one of the things he teaches, and it's totally true because it's manifested in my life, is proximity is power. If the more people you can be around, and my first mentor's name was Bill, and I met him in 1984. The real short backstory to that was I was a second assistant restaurant manager at a place called Howard Johnson. My dad kicked me out of the house, said, you got to get a third got me the job, and my third stop was Charlotte, North Carolina, where I'm at right now. And it happened to be, and your second assistant restaurant manager means your second and third shift. You're the low man on the totem pole, which happened to turn out to be a blessing for me, because what happened, there was a gentleman and a lady would come in every night. His name was Bill, and her name was Bonnie. He was 70-some years old, wore a flannel shirt, drove a pickup truck from North Carolina, right? So you have a preconceived idea, right? He's just a good old boy from North Carolina. Until I found out that he owned 80 movie theaters and restaurants in North and South Carolina. He was a multimillionaire. And his nickname in Charlotte was the Bill Walton of Charlotte. You never know who this guy was? So it happened to be on December 24th, 1984. This is when it all started changing for me. He came to the restaurant early. It was the day before Christmas, and I was second assistant, means I'm working Christmas, right? And he rolled up and he said, let me show you what I got Bonnie for Christmas. And it was a brand new blue Corvette. And I walked out, I said, I've never seen a Corvette. I couldn't spell Corvette, I couldn't smell Corvette. I knew nothing. But it was a cool car, I know that. And he threw me the keys, said, let's take a ride. And we went up and down this place called Woodlawn Road in Charlotte, and came back and said, man, Bill, Bonnie's going to dig this car. He goes, you need one of these. I said, Bill, I'm making $13,000 a year. I can barely afford my rent. He goes, that's your problem. It's your mindset. So let me show you how to be successful in business. So for the next 13 years, he taught me these lessons. And one of the things he did for me, which manifested around the proximity of power, was he had this kitchen cabinet. And he would eat at this place called Bill Spoon's Barbecue. It's a hole-in-the-wall barbecue joint. But he would have the CEO of what's now called Bank of America, CEO of what's First Union, Duke Energy, that was his confab. And he would invite me occasionally, I would just sit there and listen, just listen. And he exposed me to how to really interact with C-level people, which helped me in my business. Candidly, I never had a problem calling C-level, which helped me in my business. But for 13 years, he did this. My second book, From Turmoil to Triumph, is about these lessons.
Yeah. Can you touch a little bit more on that? Because you talk a lot in your book about mentorship and what it's meant for you and how important it is. How where did that come from? Was that just by accident, or did somebody say, "Hey, get a mentor"?
First, no one said get a mentor. Bill just asked me, if he could show me how to be successful in business, and I had nothing to lose, right? I mean, I had nothing to lose. I was 24 years old. It was May of 1997 when he called me to his office, and he said, "I want to tell you a couple things." He said, first thing, I said, "I got lung cancer." Now, Bill smoked unfiltered Camel since 1929, so it didn't really surprise you. But the second thing he did, and this is where it started really coming together. He walked over. He had a big roller desk and pulled some papers out, and he sat next to me. Instead of putting them on my lap, he said, "I want to give you these." I said, "What are these?" He goes, "These are the handwritten notes I took in 1929. When I learned this, I want to give this to you. But you have to promise me one thing." I said, "What?" He goes, "Don't let it die with you." He passed away in September of 1997. And I have these notes, right? I have the gold in my hands, and I put them in a journal. And then December of that year, Tony asked me to be the assistant head of security. Now I had proximity to Tony. And the next mentor comes in. And that's what happens in life. Once you get one, the next one will show up. But you have to open your eyes. You have to be able to receive it, right? Some people will help you.
So how do people do that?
Yeah, my current mentor's name's Don Bard. I think we were talking about that down in Atlanta. He just heard me on a podcast, and he and I interacted. Sometimes you run into people, and they will help you, but you have to be open. You have to ask. I tell a lot of my kids right now, I said, when you come across somebody who has the knowledge, just ask them. People want to share. They want to give it to you, but most people don't ask, right? They just assume that they're not going to get the response. And fortunately for me, when Tony offered me that, I traveled with him for 10 plus years. I got to see things that no one else gets to see. And what happened was, when things with Tony, I got a doctoral from him. And here's the backstory to the backstory. I was in the Miracle on the Hudson, right? The plane crash. He was the only one that called me that night in the hospital. My company didn't call me.
Tony was the only one?
My company didn't call me. My company, worse, didn't call my wife, which was even worse. So, he called me, he tracked me down, we talked. And you can go out, he did the YouTube on it. You go out and says, Tony Robbins praises Dave. You can watch what we talked about. But then at the end of that, he said, "Call me when you get to LA." I called him. And I got to LA because I was doing Ellen's show, Bonnie Hunt, all these shows. And he gave me a 3-hour doctoral. Said, "Okay, let me tell you the insight, how really we're going to do this." And he showed me how he became Tony Robbins and what to expect and the roadblocks you're going to get and the pushbacks you're going to get, right? He gave me the entire perspective. And then, I was still his security for him at that point. But then I left because, it's time to fly. You have to do your own job. Now it's time to step up. It's my job right now to pass it on to the next generation.
I remember you.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you leave on your own, or did you get a push out the door?
I tell you the story. I showed up in Chicago. He had a thing called a UPW, a firewalk. And I showed up, and he called me to a suite and said, "Listen, I'm going to find somebody else to do this." I said, "Why?" He goes, "It's time for you to fly. Time for you to do it. Now, if you keep doing this, you'll just keep doing this, right? It's time for you to do your own thing." And he basically kicked me out of the nest, which sometimes you need somebody to do that, to push you out, say, "Okay, you're on your own now," right? But then what happens, the next person shows up. That's when Don starts showing up, right? My next mentor shows up out of the blue, right? Just because you're doing the right thing. Because people are attracted to people doing the right thing. That's what's a lot going on in this world right now. People are not doing the right things. So people are pushing back on a lot of things. So that's how it happened.
So it wasn't I don't know if everybody here knows the story about the Miracle on the Hudson, and we've seen the movie, with the pilot, but you were the last person off the plane.
Last passenger off.
Last passenger off the plane.
Correct.
Was that by accident or what? Can you just take us through, what happened and how you were the last person?
That wasn't my intent. And I'll share, if you're going to be there tomorrow, you'll hear a deeper part of the story. But here's a short version. When I was leaving, I was ready to get out. Plane was going down after we survived the crash. And then you're going to hear me tell this a little bit, just more in more depth. I heard my mom talking to me when I got out, and she said, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And the right thing for me is you help other people. I knew I was alive. I didn't know anybody in the back of the plane was alive. So I climbed over the seats to the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help, and I got behind the last person. And that's how I became the last passenger out. It wasn't planned, but I was just, in the back of the plane, you don't know what's going on behind you. And that's how it happens.
So what prepared you for that? Was it walking on coals?
That definitely helped. That definitely helped. No, and that's why my first book's called Moments Matter, because my book Moments Matter was really written because what I realized is all the moments in your life are there for a reason and a purpose. Every one of them. And we discard a lot of these moments. We don't think they mean anything, but they do mean something. So in my book, what I really did is dig down deep and found, these different moments in my life that prepared me for each one of these things that I happened to do that day. Whether it was leadership, whether it was how to manage your mind. And that's what my first book's about, is because don't discard a moment. Life's too short. And that's what I realized, and that's why every moment to me now, of course, I treasure it. Because you never know what you're going to learn or who you're going to meet. That's key. Proximity is power. I don't care what anybody says. I try to put myself around people who know something that I don't know. My team is smarter than me. I intentionally do that. Because one of the things I've learned in business is that the most successful people are the ones who understand how to find their who's for their how. And once I learned that lesson, what that means is, I'm good at some things. I'm not good at a lot of things. Now I find who's the best, I go to them, and they help me. And that's how my business has now grown tenfold over the last 2 years.
Now you have all these insurance people you're going to know if
Yep.
you ever have insurance problems.
That's
moving
exactly
forward.
right. I got more assets right here. So yes.
So what was the reason you were on that plane, or where were you going?
Yep.
And the follow-on question is, how long did it take you to unpack the reason why you were on that plane that day?
Yeah, it's so I was on a business trip. I'm not going to ruin the story for you tomorrow, but I was ending a 3-day business trip, ending in New York City. So, and I was scheduled on the 5 o'clock flight. I had first class seats because I fly a lot. But we got done early that day. We got done at 10 o'clock. So I want to get home. I said, called the travel agent and worked with her, and she put me on that flight. So I think I was supposed to be on that flight.
Wow.
Did you thank her since then?
I've never spoken to her before, or again. No, it's I just talked to somebody who's a travel agency, right?
Yeah.
But I found out later that travel agent felt guilty, but they didn't know. Even my client felt guilty. I said, you didn't put me on that flight. I chose to be on the flight, and that's one of the things you learn is you got to take personal responsibility for everything in life, right? It's my choice. Life comes down to choices, and I made that choice. And sometimes the choice goes this way, sometimes the choice goes this way. Fortunately, me, it went this way.
What do you say to people who are on the other side of that? Say that flight attendant did know and the worst had happened there. How do you talk to those people who have so much empathy or ownership to negative outcomes of others that they're around? How do you talk to those people?
There are people, and I'm actually going to talk about this tomorrow, okay? So I'm not going to spoil the whole thing. But a lot of that comes from the meaning you attach to something. And one of the things I teach, if you go to my TED Talk, I talk about the meaning you attach to something produces the emotions in your life, and emotion is your life. Your whole life is nothing but emotions. So if those folks who are negative, are attaching a negative meaning. And so what you have to do is, one of the things I help people do is reframe the meaning. And that's a skill set that I learned. I was very blessed to learn it, but it's helped me even in business and sales. When you're in sales, you're having a discussion, people going down that negative pathway. It's like you start reframing things for them, and all of a sudden you're adding it's other value to them that they would never have got from anybody else. It's a unique skill, but you can learn it. You can learn it.
Is that a lot of it? Is that just changing the words?
No.
When the reframing, or
it's changing the mindset.
Changing the mindset.
It's asking different questions, right? And you do that basically 3 ways. You do that through your physiology, through your inner dialogue, or what you focus on. And what I do is I find out which one I can impact the quickest, and I go for it. I usually go with physiology, and then focus, and then inner dialogue.
So do you think that's something that can be learned, or is it genetic?
No, you can learn it. It's very, very easily be learned. Yeah. I teach that and how to do that. I mean, the quickest way is physiology, because if you move your body, you're changing everything the way what your body's doing, and then to change your mindset, right? That's the quickest way. But people ask, I couldn't do that on a plane going down. You can't get up, jump up and down, right? So I had to do, the way I did it on the plane was through my questions I asked myself. And you hear me tomorrow, I'll talk about that. I'll tell you exactly what I was thinking at that moment. It changed me to focus in a different way. So I was focusing on the outcome instead of focusing on everything else going around me.
How many minutes did you have to think about it before it hit?
6. There were 6 minutes from the time the plane took off to the time it crashed.
That's not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time, but it goes very slowly. It goes very slowly.
Well, how soon did you know after it took off that it's going down? Was it immediate?
No, it was roughly about 3 to 4 minutes.
So you had
And then when he
3
said
minutes
his
to
words,
decide.
he said, if you saw the movie, you know what he said. When he said that's when you know something serious is going to happen. And,
Are you still in touch with Sully?
I interact with him. We've shared the stage a couple times, which is very cool. He was actually my backup singer once. He let off and I closed it down.
Oh, there you go.
That was very cool, actually.
Wonder what you were singing.
Illinois State University, that happened. It was a cool night. It was a cool night.
What happened from you volunteering into getting a job to rising through the ranks of Tony Robbins' organization and becoming so close to him? I mean, he's a really close personal friend. He endorses your work. What was it that not manifested, but allowed that relationship to flourish like that?
One of the things I believe, and I know that Tony values the most, is loyalty. Loyalty. And I always had his back, right? And I think, because so many people that get around somebody like that have something they want. And he can sense that. And I'm learning how to sense that. So he's looking for people who serve first, and have his back, right? So I literally had to have his back, right? Because I was on stage left most of the time, which means his backside. It's like being a left tackle in football. Same thing, same equation, same metaphor. You have somebody's back, right? But he values that the most. And the second thing he values is the ability to anticipate. He'll tell you the number one skill set that everybody needs right now in this world is the ability to anticipate. That and resourcefulness will get you everywhere right now, because most people don't take the ability to anticipate what's next. Look at where the puck's going, right, instead of where it's at right now. And I was able to anticipate the moves. And once I learned his moves, I could anticipate where he was going to go. And he values that highly. And I realize the people he hangs with value that extremely highly likewise.
He's a pretty big guy. Have you ever tried to tackle him from behind?
I've actually played basketball against him one-on-one. He's pretty big. He can push you around pretty well, but
You're not
push
small.
back.
I mean,
You push back, right? You push back. Yeah. So
that's amazing. I was also going to ask a question about regrets. We've talked to you in the past about it, because you were talking about that commitment that he demands of people who are around him in an unselfish way. But then you also have a wife and you have kids who expect those same things. Yep. And in a prior conversation we've had, you talked about that as a regret. How did you ever talk to him about that and the demand of working with somebody who does demand that so much and balancing the two?
It's interesting you asked that question. At one time I shared with him, I said, I struggle when I go home because, I'm away from my family. I know they know that I'm doing this for them and for our family. I know they know that. But, my wife sometimes was not real positive, let's say it that way, right? And I said, one of the things the coaching he gave me, said, listen, when you go home now, don't say anything about, just make it all about them. Make it all about them. So I started doing that, and that changed my relationship. Where I'd go home and they'd ask me what was going on, and I would tell them. Then he told me, I was like, I'm not gonna tell you anything this is about you now, not about me. And that changed our demeanor, especially with my wife. She was raising, at that point, 3 kids and then 4 kids. So,
is that part of the reframing?
Yeah, part of reframing. It was a great lesson for me. Make it about somebody else, not about you.
It's probably good advice, whether you're traveling or not,
yeah.
Right? Just to come into.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
So going back to the, to the crash.
Okay.
And I don't know how much you're going to share tomorrow, with being the last one out. You were in the water the longest. Can you talk about what that experience was and how you made it out? Because I know you ran into some serious hypothermia. And
I did. And so you hear a little bit more about this tomorrow. But what happened, how I got out and why I got out, is because there was a tugboat who was part of the rescue. As he was backing out, he hit the front of the plane. And it doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you've ever seen a tugboat, they're big boats, heavy boats, and it shook the plane. When it shook the plane, I felt water going up my back. And I'm like, this thing's going down, man. I got to get out, because the worst thing you can do is be inside a container going down.
Terrifying.
You have to get out. And I had to swim. So I've been in the water, waist deep in 36-degree water for 7 minutes, and I had to swim. And, tell people that was the longest 15-yard swim of my life. Because I had to get away. You had to get away from the plane because it's going down. And I ultimately went down in 24 minutes to the bottom of the Hudson. It was nose up in the Hudson after 24 minutes. That's how I had to get out. I had to swim. And, fortunately, I learned to swim. And I'm going to tell the story tomorrow about in the Boy Scouts. Fortunately, I learned how to swim. And that's why I'm adamant about kids learning how to swim. I mean, it really hurts me to see these kids that don't even know this skill set, because if they get in the water and they don't know how to handle themselves, it's deadly. We've had two youths in Charlotte, 18 years old, both knew how to swim, died this summer.
so was that the biggest lesson? Was
No, it's
learn
not.
how to swim?
Not yet. Not yet.
Wait, before you tell the biggest lesson though, I wanted to ask, because I know understandably, there was PTSD associated with the event and trauma. And you talked to us a little bit about doing the Hudson swim and things like that, but can you just talk about when anyone has a traumatic event like that, like what did you do to work through that?
Yeah, thank you. And that's how I did my TED Talk. I was called by a magazine called AARP. Anybody heard AARP? I thought it was for old people, right? What am I going to teach old people? But they said there were two universities that were doing a study on me, North Dakota State and University of North Carolina, Charlotte. But how did I grow from a traumatic life event where others, including the captain and other people, went another direction? And I shared how I turned it around. It was turned into a TED Talk. And it's called PTG, Post-Traumatic Growth. And I just shared a few lessons and what few things that I did. But one thing I'm not going to talk about tomorrow, I'll share with you right now, is, and I learned this, is one of the things you learn by being around a Tony Robbins event is the way to really get out of it is you got to get it out of your body, because it's so into your body and it stacks so deep in your body. If you go into all depression is a stack, 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 stack. I'll give you an example, COVID. Okay, you have COVID, right? Oh, by the way, you have social justice. Oh, by the way, you have law enforcement. Oh, by the way, you have an election. It's stacked on people. That's why the suicide rate went this way. So one way to get it out of your body is I went out and spoke about it. Every time I spoke, I just got it out of my body, out of my body, out of my body. So now, I started growing. There's a lot of other things that I did, but that was probably the first thing that I did to really get out
Is
of it.
that how it keep you from cycling the emotions?
Get it
inside?
out of your head. And I tell people, I say, just talk about it. Just go. I don't care if you go to the local, Chamber of Commerce or Rotary. I don't care. Get it out of your body. And that's the first thing I do when I coach people. If they're going down a negative path, stop. We're going to talk about
Was that natural for you, or did somebody say, "Hey, talk about it, get it out there"?
And you'll hear the story tomorrow. All right. So I was
Deflection.
Yeah. I was, let's say like this. I was invited to speak the following week, and you're going to hear this whole story tomorrow. But
The very following week after the plane crashed?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was invited to speak, and I'm going to tell you, you'll hear the whole story tomorrow. But that was the first experience, and I started getting out. But something happened. You'll hear about tomorrow that triggered it. And that was the one that set me on a different pathway. That was the one, but it was a week afterwards, and I wasn't ready to speak. I was being hounded by media every place I went. Everywhere I showed up, there was a media, right? And I couldn't give it away with it. And my wife was getting the same treatment. So
you think that's the difference between the trauma people that take it one way is they're not able to express it, and the other people
Did you see the movie Sully?
Yeah.
Did you see the beginning of the movie Sully?
Yeah.
That's what was going on in his head every night, right? Repeating, stack, 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 right? When I was with him, and we did a lot of shows together, the crew and pastor did all these shows, right? He was always sullen. He would not talk to us. And we knew something was going on. We sort of knew the NTSB thing was going on, but we didn't know everything else that was going on. But he would never talk to us. He would just go off to the next thing, and it wasn't until about 5 years, he and I were at CBS together the 5-year anniversary. And that's the first time we really had a chance to talk, right? And he told me that he was having a tough time, right? I mean, he had a lot of things going on in his head. And fortunately for me, I had some things going on in my head, but I would get them out. So, yeah, it's definitely one of the first strategies I used.
So going back to the, the biggest lesson that
Yep.
you took out of this whole experience,
Yep.
can you share that with us?
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons out of this, but this is the biggest lesson, and it's transformed me. So about 3 weeks after the plane crash, crew and some of the passengers were invited to be on Good Morning America. And we were on Good Morning America, right, and everything's good, and we go to the green room. And all of a sudden, a passenger, I don't know who he was, just starts going off. And I'm like, what's wrong with this guy, right? I mean, we survived the plane crash, and we got out of the water, and we're on national TV. I mean, so what I found out later, he was going through a divorce, and he just lost his job. So the meaning he attached to the plane crash was devastation. And I came back, and I felt bad. And the first thing I said is, how many times have I judged somebody so quick before I know their backstory? I've done that thousands of times. I'm sure you have too, right? I said, if I could change that one thing, stop judging people until I know their backstory, how could that change my life? So I started working on that. Until I know somebody, that's why I talk so much. I ask people questions. I want to know your backstory. And all of a sudden, that changed everything, and all to the point where I got invited to speak at the Supreme Court. And all these things started opening up at that point. Justice Kennedy invited me to speak at the Supreme Court. So I think if I was still judgmental, people read that just like that. And that's changed the direction of my life. I tell people, just if you could change one thing right now, stop judging people immediately. That's the problem with this country. You can't even have a conversation right now, right? Stop judging people till you know their backstory. Since Martin Luther King, it's pretty basic. Judge people by the content of their character, right? It's right there in front of you. Just do it. Take action.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's a wrap with Dave.